Okay, let's get started, okay? Hope everybody's well. Hope everybody had a nice Easter. Happy Passover. Just like I passed out some information. Sometimes people forget, don't bring stuff, so I try to give you all the information. The chief has passed out some information for us tonight. But now, you didn't miss anything. Dan just passed out some information that everybody has.
Why don't we wait till, Ready?
So it's the information that we have 4 sets of minutes. I think I said something out to everyone today on the, I had asked the chief, I was interested, here he is. I had asked the chief for a breakdown of people with degrees. And it's amazing, the information. I didn't think it was that high. But, we made it a priority a long time ago to, with the Quinn bill and all that. So, but the chief can explain that, and then the chief just passed out a Massachusetts driver's license and all that. The chief will explain it in a moment, okay? So, I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and I just want to say again that Jody and Maureen have done a tremendous job, really putting things together. We're almost ready to post in 3 or 4 weeks, whatever the case may be. There's some time restrictions, like the Beacon. We have to get everything done by May 20th, so we can have it in the Beacon for June. But I think everything's coming along, and we have 4 sets of minutes. And I would like to have the minutes approved tonight, because we have to get moving here. Because people keep asking for the minutes, and Donna's at the table, and our colleague, Mike, who's a member of the committee, has a right to go to court, and may or may not go, but, we have to move on, because we have to do the people's business. So, the meeting will come to order. If we could take a look at the minutes of March 12th, okay? Those were the first minutes that I took, when we met at the town hall, remember?
I'll make a motion to approve subject to any amendments.
Yeah. Okay, there's been a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman,
There's been a,
good.
yeah, there's been a motion
Second.
by Ed, seconded by Scott on the minutes. Anything,
Just one quick typo.
Yes.
Down towards the bottom, the word following is missing an L, not a biggie.
okay? I have to blame my eyes, I see it.
No,
Okay.
it's all good.
All right. So, Mr. Secretary, you have to add an L, okay? Anything else?
No?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Great. All right. On the minutes of March 26, 2019,
Moved.
moved by Chief,
Second.
seconded by Dr. Heller. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't there, so I abstain.
Right. Yeah. Next, the minutes of April 9th.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'd
Dawn.
like to make a motion to amend these minutes to include me as a member of the committee in attendance.
Yeah, got that. Is there a second?
Yep, second.
Second? Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. And then the last, the minutes of April 23rd.
Could I just go back to that one? I apologize.
Which one, Chief?
We're looking at April 9th. On the second page, where it starts out, motion by Mr. Nero, come down, Chief O'Loughlin stated that the email from Mr. Bodie is not actually an opinion. Based on the email, he inquires if he will still be on the search committee after July 1st, 2019. I would suggest that Chris Moran and Dr. Heller made the same expression at that point in time. And then on the next point, which starts out with
Chief,
Mr.
one second.
So what will we do, Chief? What do you suggest?
that we had the fact that 2 other people
Yeah, okay.
Isn't
had a similar view.
Isn't that addressed below the Dr. Heller
stated that the email should not be taken as gospel, as just an opinion. And
But
Mr. Moran said the same thing under interpretation.
that's a different point. Chris was sitting beside me, and Dr. Heller was across from me,
So why don't we just add,
and they too questioned whether or not people could be removed from the
So Chief
committee.
Yeah,
O'Loughlin,
absolutely.
yeah,
Right, you're right, yep.
And then on the next point where it says Mr. Moran, the word "to," it's a typo, it shouldn't be there.
Where, Chief?
The next very bullet,
Yeah,
it
Mr. Moran
says,
stated the
does
email.
not have to, the authority, does not have the authority, so
Yeah,
the word "to," and that's just moving along. And then in that, on the following page, Maureen, and for someone that has their name misspelled regularly as an, I guess,
Yeah. It's
you know, with the
Giffen, not
apostrophe and
Griffin. Yep.
OLO and OLAU. Maureen's last name is Giffen,
Giffen, yep.
not Griffin.
Thank you,
And
Chief.
that's an easy one to,
Okay,
I get caught up with that one.
yeah.
That's it.
I was calling her.
Thank you.
You want to revote it?
This is good. Okay.
Amended? I'll move as amended.
Yeah, second by Chief. Okay. With those changes, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Ed and Chief second. And then the last one is April 23rd.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Rich.
fourth bullet point on the first page,
Yep,
the chairman then as the
Correct.
should be then addressed.
yep, yep.
And then on the second page, fourth bullet, Mr. Berderoy brought up that Mrs. Ziglia, I think in keeping with, and also the Griffin, it's
Yeah.
Giffen,
Correct.
but it should be Jody, if you're going to be, just be
Yes.
consistent instead of miss,
Yep,
make her a real person instead of a,
sure. Yeah. Richard, anything else?
I think that was what, again, Griffin down
Yeah, at
on
the
the last
bottom, yeah.
bulletin board.
Right in the middle, all
Jody.
of that.
And I believe, and also on the third page, the second bullet, also Giffen instead of Griffin.
Yes. Maureen?
Mr. Chairman, the bottom bullet on the first page, second line, the word "to," T-O, should be taken out. The next line, it's Board of Selectmen, it says Board is Selectmen. Just typos. no
Yes.
biggie.
No, thank you. All right, so moved and seconded. Anything else? All in favor? Unanimous. That's great. Okay, so what I'd like to do is have Maureen and Jody come up again.
Could I raise one point
Sure,
of business,
Chief.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick? I'd like to make a motion that, you know, we are going to receive funding from town meeting, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And if we do, rather than have 12 people sign every single invoice that comes through, or a majority, that we authorize the chairman, upon approval of the committee, to sign so that Zach Taylor can process the invoices and pay whoever we receive services from.
I'll second that, Dave. That's a motion.
Thank you.
And I'll bring, matter of fact, I met with Zach today, and he's going to give me the procedure, but he had recommended that as well. And I'll bring all the bills here so that everybody knows what we're doing.
And just on that subject, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, and just,
Sure.
the Finance Committee voted favorable on Wednesday, 22nd, I believe, for a favorable rating, favorable recommendation, thank you, at town meeting for the $50,000. And we are going to be appropriating that through free cash, not through raise and appropriate. So the money will be available right after town meeting. We don't have to wait till July 1st since we're paying out of free cash. So I just wanted to update everyone on
We don't
that.
have to wait the 10 days or whatever.
Oh, the 10 days, yes,
Yeah.
but not till July 1st,
Yeah.
is the point.
Thank you.
So you have a motion and a second, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, moved and seconded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all, any discussion? Not all in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Maureen, Jody?
I'm sorry to tell you all, we have a lot more paper to give you.
That's okay.
That's all good.
Thank you for the minutes, okay? Thank you, that's a great start. We're moving in the right direction.
could you give us just as they're setting up on, we talked before just about, maybe with the two people, what an idea of a timeline might be for us, not dates, but just from here, what you're thinking. That's all.
Well, after the presentation tonight, we should have the job description pretty much wrapped up. And then I think one of the bigger decisions that the committee has to make is the educational requirement. I think I sent that out to you. And I also sent out the information from the chief, and you can go over it briefly after, about the number of people, men and women, in the Milford Police Force who have degrees. I was really, I know it was high, but not that high. So that's the other thing that we're going to have to decide. And the biggest thing is, should it be master's degree preferred or required? Well, we can discuss that, but I want to get the chief's opinion on that too. And then once that's done, then Scotty, can you tell us from what I understand?
So the way the process works from there is so from a process perspective,
Sure.
the hiring manager for this position, the hiring authority, the appointing authority in this case, is the Board of Selectmen. So the job description would need to get their voting and approval, and then it would go to the Personnel Board. We can meet as a joint meeting, which has happened in the past as well, just to expedite things, but the Personnel Board has to approve the job description. The job posting is a completely separate item. Job postings do not require approval from anyone else but this body. We can actually post the position because the posting and the job description, the posting can say, wanted, Milford Police Chief, and send it out. That does not require approval from anybody else but us. That does not require the Personnel Board approval. In fact, it's a fairly common practice that positions will get posted and then we'll come back and do potentially adjustments to job descriptions. But the job posting, from a process perspective, and I realize from the links and stuff like that, it may be different. From a process perspective, the posting does not require Personnel Board approval. The job description does. I have added, just for the benefit of the board, I have added a standing agenda item to the Personnel Board's agenda for job description, specifically for when we have something that needs to come before us, we can react and move as quickly as possible. It's a standing agenda item now with the Personnel Board, so when that description is ready, we're able to move forward and get that to the next one. But from a process, the Personnel Board does not have to approve a posting.
This is, very important. Any questions about Scott, who's the chairman of the Personnel Board?
And just distinguishing that it is two separate things, posting versus a description.
So potentially, we could be very close to agreement on the final job description, and then go ahead at the same time and post a different version of that for the posting.
And very frequently, and obviously you two are the professionals, very frequently the posting and the description is very lengthy and involved, and it can be multiple pages. The description, depending on if you're online or especially in the newspaper, you're going to be limited to words. It's not going to be multiple pages long. You're not going to have a 3-page job posting in the newspaper. You're going to have a small excerpt of, wanted Milford Police Chief. Please contact for further details.
So one of the things that I think both of us have probably seen as we've been looking at so many different job descriptions for chiefs of police is many of them have a link that you can click on, and it will go to a full job description that somebody can edit.
And that is the concern, because we either have to, until this new job description is approved, we don't want to put that in there, so we have to do the old one. So ideally, and I think the Board of Selectmen as well are ready to expedite this as quickly as possible. And so I think that as soon as this committee has made their decisions, we can get both sides of that pushed through very quickly.
Jim, nevertheless, under the bylaw, as Mr. Nero has pointed out a couple of times, this committee sets the criteria, job description aside. So if this committee, if it goes through Personnel Board, Selectmen, and they say, oh yes, master's degree required, that's the job description. But what gets advertised pursuant to the bylaw, this committee sets that criteria.
Right. And that's what we just said. The posting versus the description is two different.
All right.
The posting is up to only us.
I missed it. I was doing 3 other
The
things.
posting is only us. The description, the job description, which is two different things.
I agree.
The job description ultimately has to be approved by two groups. It's got to be approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Personnel Board. Job posting is a completely
agree.
separate item.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Scott, thank you. Okay, this time we'll go to Jody and Maureen.
Who cares?
So what I just handed out is a copy of the description, the job description, with the changes that were requested last meeting. And perhaps we can go through that to see if there are any other concerns with what's in the job description. I know that there needs probably to be more discussion around the degree requirement and if there's anything else that anyone, yes.
Jody, we left off at education, and then we started to proceed and skipped to others. So I think we need to go back to education, start there, and finish the job description first.
Sure.
Dan, do you know how far we got beyond that? We went through
I
it.
don't think we got far beyond that. We started to talk about it, but we didn't finalize anything.
I meant, we agreed to leave education, but how far beyond that on the bullet points do we
You
get?
completed it.
We completed, okay, all right, that's what I meant. Okay.
So the education and experience is on page 4. And although you currently receive a master's degree with major coursework in police administration or related field, a minimum of 10 years of progressively responsible experience in law enforcement and crime prevention work, including 5 years in command or supervisory capacity, or any equivalent combination of education, training, and experience. It's an interesting term, yes.
I'd like to offer for our consideration the, at the 5-year issue, 3 lines down, crime prevention work, including 5 years. I want to add, including 5 years within the last 10 years of senior command and/or in an executive level supervisory capacity. I think the issue was, or I'm confused, because the language was not, I don't think it was grammatically correct. So we've got to make that correct if we're going to accept this language. 5 years within the last 10 years. So you can't go back 20 years and say, I had this experience. It has to be somewhat recent. I think that's reasonable. And senior command and/or executive level supervisory experience.
So I get the 5 in the last 10. I guess my question is how are we defining senior command? Because that potentially exclude anybody but existing chiefs?
I'm sorry.
That makes,
We don't have, I don't think, you don't have to define it. You don't have to define it, and we don't have to define it. We couldn't define it.
So why put it in?
Because it's a requirement to be the chief of police. You can't have command experience at the patrol level or the sergeant level. You have to have command experience in a senior executive position.
So again, I'll go back and ask, how would you define senior executive?
I think you know that when you see it.
So I think we need to define it.
It's definable based on,
It's definable, but you're going to end up with more words. No, you can, for
No, I'm not saying it's defined.
By
I'm saying is
example-
we have to be able to quantify it and
Yeah.
define it. And so I'm asking, how would you define it?
I think, if you, are we going to put it in here?
No, I'm
Oh,
asking.
in the
when we get an
evaluation stage, we would say senior command experience, and we would put examples.
Yeah, but
If you don't want to put it in here, we can do that also, but I don't think it's necessary.
Well, perhaps we should put
I
it.
think what he's suggesting is at the level of command position. I mean, those are terms that,
Yeah, well, it says command in there. I'm trying to understand senior.
well,
senior
it also
executive.
says supervisory.
One at a
So the
time, okay?
question,
One at a time. Go ahead, Chief.
so the question comes is when you talk supervisory, I think what I'm hearing Mr. Nero say is, no, I want someone of the level of a lieutenant or higher. I don't want a rookie. I don't want a rookie sergeant managing this agency.
All right, but in the evaluation stage, we would give so many points for lieutenant, so many points for captain, so many points for a major, that type of stuff, but there are other labels other than
Correct.
that. Yeah.
Well, why would we put it in there then if we're going to do it in the evaluation thing? That's
Right, I thought the generic terms of senior
Fine.
and executive were fine for what we were doing right here.
So can I make a suggestion?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jody.
A job description typically has some minimum qualification, so if the minimum qualification is a lieutenant, then it should be lieutenant or above.
Right. And that's what I'm referring to. We're looking for a $150,000 guy. We're
Right.
not looking for a patrolman.
Right.
And if you want to define it that way, I thought we would define it in the evaluation stage.
Well, I think for applicants applying, they need to know, if they don't meet the qualification, then we don't want them to apply.
Right, but it doesn't have to be here. My suggestion also is going to be that we need to put down each of the evaluation points. You're going to refer them, for instance, from the generic advertisement to the job description and to the evaluation points that are put into this committee's bylaw. I would also suggest that we publish exactly what we're evaluating also. So the evaluation standards and substandards, and tell them you have to reply to each one of these, because we're not going to tell them this, but you're going to be evaluated on each one of these. You don't want to miss any of these, because you don't address them, you're not going to get evaluated.
Well, we haven't figured out what our evaluation tool is yet.
Right.
And, I mean, I sit on a board now where they developed an evaluation tool that takes a computer to figure out so we don't do it, because no one could figure out we did a 365 evaluation view, which handles the whole thing. And by the time you're done, you've got evaluations, and you're trying to enter them in the system, and you go, holy boy, and that's it, so we don't do it. So, I mean, we've got to make this so that if we get a number of applicants, there's an easy way, but it's not going to be easy, but...
You would list, in my opinion, you would list all of the items in the bylaw which are required. The job description is not required, but we would list the job description titles also, and tell them you have to respond to these.
But could we go back, because the first thing you mentioned was the 10 years, when we do that first, grab that.
Right.
Now, you see, was that what we were, that's how we started this.
The first suggestion is 5 years within the last 10 years.
Right.
Okay? Then if we want to discuss senior command and/or executive level supervisory capacity, Jody's suggestion or somebody's suggestion was lieutenant or above. That's acceptable. You got to be an officer. You're not going to be a patrolman applying for this position.
Yeah, so that, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so that was what I was trying to ask the chief, is that I think when we talk about senior command, and I'm honestly asking for my own education, so are we going to put a rank on there? How do we determine senior command? Because lieutenant in the state police is going to be at a different level of seniority as far as whether, is that senior command? Because then there's captains, majors, colonels above them.
Right.
Versus in Milford, where a lieutenant, that's one of the most senior people in the force.
But I don't think we have anything.
But a lieutenant in the state police guard, he or she manages a barracks in some cases, so they manage more officers than we have here in this department. You take the detectives, state police detective units that are assigned to the DA's office, most of those are commanded by a lieutenant detective. Worcester's the rare one because you have a captain detective, Al Hunt is there. But most of those units are commanded by a lieutenant at that rank. That's a command position. They call it commissioned and non-commissioned, because they follow the military model much closer than other agencies.
So that's what I was just trying to understand, is that,
So for them, non-coms and commission are separated at the sergeant level.
And that's what I was just trying to understand, is when we put in senior, if we say senior command, I just want to make sure that we're able to very clearly define that. I've never been in the military, nor have I ever been in the police department, so I'm just trying to understand how those are all working and making sure that we understand it. And that's what
When we sketch out the evaluation sheet, we will discuss it.
But for right now, working on just the job description, we've got to be able to define it within that as well.
when you say evaluation sheet, you mean when the candidates are before us, we're evaluating them?
When we get these, let's say we get 100 applications, but you're going to get a lot of them across the country. We need an evaluation sheet to score each of the items that are in the bylaw and each of the items that are in the job description.
Yes.
And then we, for instance, we will establish we have 40 people that are distinguishable from the other 60. And we'll drop to 60. There'll be no more review of those 60. Then the 40, we will then we will develop a consensus among us who are the top 15, 20, something like that. And I'm only giving an illustration.
So may I
And then, and
Go ahead.
then attempt to clarify those by numerical order. Let's say the total score is 100. Anybody above 80 is going to be considered for discussion amongst this group. That kind of thing, in general terms. Everything's adjustable, flexible.
So just to add to what you're saying, I've been in many situations where we have a board of people or a committee of people that are looking at candidates. We create an interview guide, and we have competencies or whatever is listed in the bylaws, however you define that we're looking for in candidates with a rating scale for each competency.
Right.
And then everybody rates them on each of those competencies.
Right.
And before that, even that point, we do a screening to make sure we've got people that just meet qualifications
Right.
and are the best candidates for us to review. The rest of them.
That's what I was talking about,
Yes.
as opposed to the interview. The
Yes.
interview will be different.
Yes.
And maybe a different evaluation system also.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions, please. One of them is, Chief, is lieutenant the lowest ranking position in executive command that we're, at the state police level?
Right.
The lowest non-patrolman?
Correct. So the state police actually have a dividing line, and they call them commissioned officers and non-commissioned, very much like the military. So you have non-commissioned, those are the boots on the ground. And you have the ROTC, and they become a lieutenant or a captain through ROTC, and they're non-coms. So that's the state police. That's actually their dividing line.
Okay.
By way of example,
So
but it's also the dividing line in this community. The lieutenant is non-union. The lieutenant's position in this community. Below that, they're all unionized.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. So Jody's suggestion to have the ranking be lieutenant or above in the job description. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not done yet, Tomato, but,
Just on that topic, so we don't lose it.
oh, sure.
My thought process would be that it shouldn't be lieutenant, it should be captain, but we would eliminate everybody in the Milford Police Department. We can't do that.
You're eliminating effectively anybody anyway, with the exception of 2 candidates. As soon as you put it at lieutenant. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, I'm just saying that's right. You're going to do that anyways.
But we shouldn't.
Yeah. Don, anything else?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
go ahead.
So,
Then Chris.
do we have, one of my questions, and this was kind of brought up in terms of timeline, but is there a project we can establish in the timeline within which we are going to complete each task
I've
that
thought about
we're
it. I've thought
responsible
about it a
for?
lot. I've written stuff down, and I'll bring it to the committee, but I would hope that if we post it, we'll have to decide to keep it open for 30 days, 35 days, whatever the committee decides, right? Then the applications probably should go, talk to the administrator. He'll take care of the applications coming in. Then I would want a subcommittee to open the applications. So, everything's above board. And then we have to do set up the interviews. So, I don't
The
know.
evaluations, the evaluation is what's going to take the most time.
Sure.
You got 100 candidates.
Sure.
That will take, again, we're not all going to review that 100. We're going to have to somehow divide it up.
Right.
So back to the
Looking
timeline,
at
are we
probably-
going to establish a formal timeline for what is our objective for posting the position? What is our objective for completing the job description? What is our objective? When do we expect to have the rubric completed, the evaluation rubric? And then, all of the other tasks that follow, so that we're following kind of an organized plan.
I mean, it depends on the number of applications we receive. So then once we do all that stuff, then the actual interviews, then we're going to talk about tonight, hopefully, there are firms out there that can assist us if the committee wants to go that way. And then we have to set up interviews, but I'm saying probably, I don't know, if everything goes well, we could hopefully provide 3 to 5 candidates to the Board of Selectmen after Labor Day. If things go faster, great. If things take longer, we don't know. I want Chris and then Jim. No, Chris has had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nero, I very much like and good pickup on the 5 years not being away from 10 years, outside of 10 years. Because I do think that's important. I don't like someone who's been away from the job for too long coming back in, because Chief knows it, the world changes so quickly now. If you've been out of the game for too long and try to come back, I don't care how much experience you've had, when you come back, it's like you're playing a whole nother game. So I just want to compliment you on that, because I definitely think that should be in there, and I think that's important. The only other thing that I wanted, because when Jody made a comment, we went through the whole job description, and every single time we did anything, we said, let's not add this because it pigeonholes someone. So the only reason that I don't know that you necessarily want to put a rank, I think you can put the word senior, and that's fine, just because there may be someone in a department where they're, you weigh certain things, as we say in here, other things, whether it's education, maybe they have a doctorate or in criminal science and that kind of stuff. I don't want to pigeonhole it where I know it would make more work from us because we'd get more applications, but I think on the other end, we make it in our evaluations where people like lieutenants, captains get, a much higher score on the evaluation, and you make it up on that end. I'm just afraid on the job description.
Can I be responsive?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to get 20 chiefs of police from across the country. Some guy from Dakota, North Dakota, who wants to be considered because we pay our police officers 2 or 3 times the amount that guy makes. So there's not going to be anybody from the bottom that's going to rise to the top doing what you're saying.
No, I'm not arguing. Maybe we put it in our posting, maybe. I just don't want to maybe in the job description. We can decide as us as a posting, but in the job description, just keep the rank out of it for that. But if we choose to do it for our posting, as we talked about, because it's our discretion that we want to put lieutenant on it, then that's great.
Remember, you're hiring, by job description, you're hiring that guy, okay? You don't want a lieutenant, and a sergeant or a patrolman, you want somebody of that competence.
And I'm not arguing that, Mr. Nero. I am in agreement with you. I just have talked about just in the job description, not put it there. But then in our posting, if we want to put that, because that's our discretion. That's just my opinion.
Can I just respond to what you're saying?
Yeah.
In this same paragraph, it states, or any equivalent combination of education, training, and experience. So I think that...
Well, that's why I think that might come up later, too, whether we're going to have that in there, and that's why I brought that up, just as a preference. Because if we get rid of everything, because I remember I asked about the semicolon and everything after that, I just want to make sure the top portion meets what we want if we're going to eliminate everything after the semicolon. If we're going to keep everything after the semicolon, then I'm okay with it. I just, like I said, if our posting says lieutenant, that's great. I just didn't want the job description to go that way.
Executive and senior command. Does that satisfy what you want to do?
And once again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just didn't want to pigeonhole anything.
Jim?
Yeah,
I'm done, Jimmy. Go ahead.
No, just briefly, because several questions have come up from a couple of the members looking for a firm timeline. The last 2 committees that sat 18 and 20 years ago, it was an 11-month process. I don't think we're credibly could say we can get this done in 4 months. Even tonight, there's questions about semicolons in the next 3 weeks. So I don't know if it's reasonable to try to set that.
Well, just for an idea.
And that's all.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's fair.
Chief?
If I could, I mean, I answered the questions as best I could as to how the rank structures are and the rest of it. I think, based on what Chris Moran was saying and what Dan Nero was saying, that you may want to consider this fact that, and I think Scott Harrison, you touched on it, that in this department you have one deputy chief, one lieutenant, but you have a sergeant that has a law degree. You have, of the other 10 sergeants, 9 of them have master's degrees. So I just pose this to you. If we go with the original language that Dan Nero suggested, then you get to where Jody is, that can you look at someone and say, wait a second, but this person has had some unique experiences in this community, in this department. I just put it out there because I'm not looking to box anyone out.
Sure, no. Eddie, yeah. Eddie, Dan, and then Jim.
I think that the chief with his experience was able to capsulize what I was thinking, because there are many different departments, also in the state and in New England, that have a different ranking system or whatever. We're one of the middle to larger ones. But I agree. I think if there are people of the sergeant rank or whatever with all that experience and the degrees, we went from going from that master's or bachelor's degree to a level now where we've gone from one end of the scale to the other, just in a conversation, because we're saying master's degree or equivalent. Now we've gone to another level. I think it's a sane compromise to have it, leave the language to respect the fact that not just our department, but I'm sure there's others that have sergeants with a lot of experience and detailed and degrees and so on. So that to me is where I'm coming from on this anyway.
Now,
The point is not a law degree. The point is executive experience and command ability to command a 50-officer team. Not to have a law degree, because that's got very little to do with it. And if you start opening it up to patrolmen and sergeants, you're going to get 1,000 applications. And it's unnecessary to reduce our standards when you're going to get 25 or 30 police chiefs across the country with all of the experience that you want.
Just along the lines of what the chief was saying, the town next door, Holliston just promoted the sergeant to the position of chief sergeant. They got the job. And I don't know, the chief might know more about his aptitude or his abilities as he's been a chief. I don't know if you've had any interaction with him, but it seems like everything I've heard has been good from what I've seen. He was a sergeant, he wasn't a lieutenant. I think he does have a master's degree at least. But I mean, there's something that Holliston did, and they seem happy with it. So I don't know if we can rule people out.
If I could just add, we're actually 65 people in the police department. That's civilians, a couple of civilian clerks, and 12 to 15 dispatchers. 25 part-time cops. And then the specials and auxiliaries that perform for us. So actually, forget it, we're up to like 90. Holliston has 28 officers. They can set whatever criteria they want. I don't know if it compares to Milford.
Jody, Maureen, any comments so far? As far as in your profession, I'm sure you'll come up with different things.
I mean, I understand the concern about having applicants from all over the country who have not even risen to the rank of lieutenant applying for the position. I would assume that if there is ever any consideration given to anyone at a rank below lieutenant, it would typically be somebody that's within the Milford police force because they have the experience already with the community and building relationships. So, I mean, that's something to consider. We can always put in a job posting that we strongly prefer candidates with X, Y, and Z.
I think we're getting bogged down on the description, that's one.
Well, it's a good discussion. Yeah. Because I think, hey, we want to be fair We want to try to get the best person, man or woman. We were very fortunate 18 years ago to, have Chief Olafern. And, but we also, if there's somebody in the police force who's pursued his education, done a great job, and only the chief would know that. And that, I guess, you can tell if someone has command potential, is going to be a good leader and all that stuff. And those are intangibles that sometimes you can't delineate in a job description. So we just want to be fair. And I think everyone around this table wants to obtain the best, but also be fair to what we have so far. Yes,
So if I could just kind of follow up on what you're saying, is that, we can, while we interview, we can screen out people for whatever reasons, whatever things that we're requiring of the top candidates. So somebody who's a sergeant isn't necessarily going to go on to the next level. I think that's part of an interview process. That's a screening out process. So,
Out of the 100 candidates, excuse me, we're only going to interview 10. That kind of thing.
I would say probably face-to-face interviews, probably 10, but phone screens potentially would happen before that. And that's something that your director of HR would be doing as part of her role.
Yeah, Jim, 1 second, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
just along that.
Yeah.
If you're trying to include Milford officers because they're born and raised here, they've worked here for 20, 30 years, I understand that. We have 10 sergeants. Some of the sergeants just become a sergeant, and they're supervisor of patrol officers under their immediate command. There are other sergeants who go on to command units, whether it's special operations, whether it's detective or administrative or court prosecutions. So they're patrol sergeants, but they're also have gone beyond that level of just patrol supervision and gone into other things which would make them more qualified. So that's something to consider with, what you just said.
And I think that's why it's important to keep that phrasing when that's after that semicolon, right? Because we can't anticipate what kinds of experience or education or background someone's going to have that would put them on that list that we keep. So I think it's good to clarify what you're really looking for, but not to exclude others who might surprise you. And I will tell you just from my experience that there are, I've always put in that phrasing, and I've had candidates come forward that had I not left that in, they never would have applied for the position and been considered. And the experience that they have might not have been what I expected, but it applies so well that sometimes they rise to the top.
Right. Eddie and then
Well, if we're going back to this then, I'd like to make a motion just to open it up for discussion, where the part that Dan had mentioned about 5 years, including 5 years in a commander supervisory capacity within the last 10 years should be in there. But I think the rest should basically stay the same. I think commander supervisory capacity. So I think we've talked around this, and there's enough ways and flexibility in the other part of this we're going to do the screening we need to do without elaborating word for word or whatever. I think it still gives us, and it gives us the leeway to be open if local candidates apply or candidates apply from a force that has basically just sergeants or whatever with a lot of experience. So that's the amendment I would just make sure that the 5 years of command and supervisory experience were in the last 10 years, and then leave the rest as it is. So I think that's vague. It's general enough. It covers what we need to do without
Okay, so
So
that's a motion.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
I second the motion.
Second, okay. Any discussion?
I'm not sure what the motion is now.
Ed?
Motion is to keep the language exactly as is with the addition of the 5 years within the last 10, which you proposed.
Okay, I'm opposed. It's open for discussion,
Yeah.
right?
Discussion.
Okay.
Can I just, before you go, Dan?
Sure, go ahead.
Here we go again. We're moving way too fast. A lot of questions have come up from many of the members, and what it looks like is they're trying to keep language so they can include as many people from Milford as they can, which is fine. The last two committees submitted 5 names to the Board of Selectmen, and there was 2 candidates from Milford. And they got in because the committee thought it was fair to get 2 of them in. Frankly, I don't interrupt you, please.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
So, I don't think we should vote on this right now. I need to go back and really look at what everybody just said, instead of rushing and voting something in that we're not sure of. Okay, Dan, sorry.
I'm sorry, before Dan,
Hey.
David, you lay your hand.
No, Ed kind of mentioned most of it. I definitely agree with the 5 years experience in the last 10 years. I think that's a great addition. If memory serves from reading through a lot of the job description examples that Maureen provided, Maureen and Jody have provided from other towns, and command and supervisory seem to be in all of them. I don't remember really reading any specific titles or senior or any. It seemed to be, mentioning the command experience for sure. But I think going to I think Chris mentioned it, the last statement, I think after the semicolon, honestly, you can put anything you want before the semicolon, and that after the semicolon kind of opens it up to any. So, I think we're spending a lot of time on the first part of the sentence, and if we're going to approve what's after the semicolon, it's a lot of wasted time, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think that Bruce said it, Jim said it. This is very important. Matter of fact, Jody and I talked about it, Maureen and I talked about it recently. So I'm going to have, good discussion of this before we come up with the right parameters. Chief.
Just what Dave just said, and correct me if I'm missing something. I think where things are getting hung up is command or supervisory experience, because they're two different, versus command and supervisory experience. Mm-hmm. So the person has had to have had command experience. And, my approach to things is, and I've promoted a lot of people. Probably every person that sits in a chair there that's now a supervisor or above, I put them there. And when you do interviews, my view has always been, don't come in and tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what you've done. Show me. Because everyone's going to walk in the door and tell you how they're going to put everything, the ship right. And no, if you had that opportunity and you didn't do it, tell me why. So, and that, especially people that are right there at your fingertips in the agency itself. So, I don't have, me personally, I don't have a problem with supervisors from this agency applying, but they're going to be evaluated against all of the other applicants, just as Mr. Nero said. Many that will have a wealth of experience and a wealth of education. So I think, that's it puts the onus on them to step up, and be able to show that they can perform the task. I would change that one word, command or supervisory capacity, to command and supervisory capacity, because as Jim Herron said, there are some sergeants in our agency that have, listen, there are folks that come to work and they do their job and they supervise the staff under them. And then there are others that, their motivation is at a different level, and their contribution to the agency and the community is at a different level. So I think it's fair to evaluate them based upon those experiences. That's just my thoughts on it. I would change that one word, and I think it accomplishes, I hope it accomplishes what Mr. Nero was trying to accomplish, and the others.
Yeah,
There's a lot of times, how many times have we seen a resume that the person has 2 PhDs, but really, he couldn't, get himself out of a paper box. So
Yeah.
it's a touchy thing. Donato, you want to say something?
Yes. To your point about interviewing somebody and being surprised, I think we cannot lose the fact that we're appointing or choosing a CEO. We're not picking somebody at the bottom or the middle. where we're going to get some surprises. Probably shouldn't be any surprises at the CEO level. You are hiring a $150,000 executive. I understand all your comments, but I think they're misplaced. We're looking for a CEO with a wealth of experience in a command and supervisory level. We're not looking to take a patrolman off the street in Milford and make him a chief of police. If that's your purpose, then I think we're wasting our time here. We are choosing a chief executive. Excuse me.
So we're still
Can I
on.
just clarify?
Go ahead,
I think
Maureen.
surprise probably wasn't the right choice. What I was trying to say, from another state, somewhere else in the country that comes in and their ranking is different or the experience they have is different. So it was more that someone that we would not know what they're bringing to the table. So that's all I wanted to clarify.
But to be responsive, again, if you're working for General Electric and you're selecting the CEO that you're going to pay $100 million to, somebody flies in, you are not talking about anybody within that organization that you're trying to get to that level. You are talking at a completely different level, and I think that's exactly what we're doing here. We're talking at $150,000 level, not the patrolman or the sergeant level.
Okay, this is a good discussion.
Yeah.
And Eddie,
I made the motion before, I think that Mr. Secretary seconded it, but I'll change it to amend it to reflect what the chief said, and
Command or supervisor to
command and supervisory
Capacity.
capacity. I'll make,
Second it.
And define,
yeah, okay.
and what did I?
and define supervisory capacity. If I
Well,
supervise
wait a
a
minute, wait a
patrolman,
minute, I'm making,
I
I'm doing the
understand
amendment
that.
right now.
Don't you want to add a word that defines that in there?
I'm not sure yet, but let's take one step at a time here. We can't go to the end before we get to the middle, so.
Let me just ask Chris what we have so far. Chris?
Right now, Mr. Bertorelli made a motion to add 5 years within the last 10 years to be included, and also to change command or supervisory experience to command and supervisory experience. And leave the rest of the description of the education experience the same.
Chief, is that what you also expressed?
I suggested that because I thought it might resolve
Right.
what I was hearing. If
Yeah.
not, then I didn't hear right.
Yeah.
Dr. Howard, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Scott?
Yeah, and I mean, I think all the points are valid. I think I think what you are absolutely right, that we are looking for a chief executive to take this forward. But there's a reason why there's an interview process and there's a screening process. We're going to advertise it. We're going to take the applicants. We're going to screen them. We're going to interview them. Then we're going to pass 3 to 5 names on the board of selectmen. The job description is not the selection process. The job description is describing the minimum qualifications, as Jody and Maureen, our HR professionals, have expressed to us. It's providing the minimum qualifications that open it up, they'll invite people to then apply. It's on us then to then screen them from there. I agree with you. If the custodian from GE applies to be the CEO, guess what? Just because they meet the minimum qualifications, there's zero chance or very unlikely that the board is going to appoint them. But that's why you don't hire from a job description. You hire from an interview process and a screening process. And at this point, that process has been pretty well laid out. That being said, Mr. Chairman, I completely agree that adding those couple of pieces on, I think Donato's point of adding the 5 years within the last 10 makes a lot of sense. The chief's point of adding on the and versus or, I think that starts to really get and express what we're looking for as a minimum qualifications. Again, whether it's lieutenant, captain, chief, what have you, it does allow that, as the chief had said, and Jimmy both said. They do this every single day. They're in that station every single day. There's a lot of sergeants that have a lot of unique experiences that are beyond just I show up on the supervisory position. They're really in command of it.
I just want to get everybody's opinion if we can. Richard, what's your feeling about this whole conversation?
No, for this part, I agree where we are. Is the second, though, after the semicolon, I have some issues on that. But at this point, I agree with it. I think also, as we all know, we've all interviewed people or had people apply for positions. There are going to be people out there that are going to apply for this position that are going to be kind of on the line or whatever. You can't avoid that. Somebody looks and say, hey, I read this and say, well, I think I'm the person for this job, because they read certain things into it. So we're going to get those, and those are going to be in the screening process will work out. So we're not going to eliminate that situation. You gals deal with it probably more hundreds of times than I have in my career. But, you know, over the years in my own field, that's why I used to, when I'd put an ad in, I just put minimum, because people got, when I had it spelled out and paid the Daily News or anybody big bucks for an ad, didn't matter. You didn't get what you wanted from people sending. So I think we have to look at that. And then the other issue that we have to talk about that, you know, mentioned is to, which will be part of this, is to whether we're going to hire a company that will, you know, look at a lot of this stuff and take that away from us, so that that's what they're trained for. And I think that's going to save. But I think we need to get the groundwork done, and I agree with Ed's amendment here. I think that, for this part, clears that up.
Jody, anything else from that perspective?
No, I mean, I think, I do agree with a lot of what you said. You know, if there's a lot of concern about what's after that semicolon, you know, like that, I think the last part that we really need to talk about, and then hopefully we can move on from there.
Yeah, before we get to Donna, I just want the secretary to, can you read what we have so far, Chris?
Bertarelli made an amended motion to accept the job description of 5 years within the last 10 years, as well as to change the or to an and in terms of command and supervisory experience.
Okay, that was seconded, right?
Seconded by Dr. House.
Okay. Any discussion? Donato?
I just would like to add the word senior before supervisory.
We have to vote on the motion.
Well, the motion as it is, I understand.
Unless he amends. He can amend.
Well, we have an amendment already. I don't want to make it confusing.
He can, though.
Okay. So you want to add
The
senior?
word senior before supervisory. Eddie, you have any objection to that? Making that
I don't know
part
what
of
it means.
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah, I think we're getting into it. I think leave it as it is. The reason I say that is because I think the two people involved in HR have already said the other process we're going to use is going to basically do what we want to do without getting hung up on the words. And I'm in no particular, despite whatever, any kind of rush, but I'm just trying to make progress so we can get to the next step or beyond the semicolon. Because that could be a year's work there or equivalent. That's all I'm saying. So it's baby steps here till we get to the...
Richard?
I think having the word senior is just kind of redundant. If somebody's in a command or supervisory, you're gonna be in that. You're gonna be, to me, what somebody is a senior. You don't need to. That's understood.
I'm sorry, did yours just say and, or did you leave the and or? I'm sorry.
No, it's and. The word or will be gone.
You're right.
Yeah.
Doctor, you're right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so
don't.
I think Donato has an amendment for senior. No second. Okay, that's okay. Just trying to make it easier for our secretary, who gets paid a lot of money.
Call the vote.
Chief,
volunteering
you had something?
No, call the vote. Good to go.
Are we clear on the, what we're voting for? On the amendment first,
Thank you.
right?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? None opposed. So now we'll vote on the motion, right? The motion is again, Chris?
I thought the amendment wasn't the motion. Right.
So say it again, because I'm sure something.
Okay. Mr. Bertarelli made a motion to add 5 years within the last 10 years, progressively responsible experience in law enforcement, as well as change command or supervisory capacity to command and supervisory capacity.
Right.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, right?
Yep.
Unanimous, oh, great, okay. So now we have the educational, what we need, right? So we've gone over now the job description. Is that with all the highlights that people asked for and red and blue? That's complete, right, Jody, Maureen?
Yes,
We didn't complete education.
No.
Yeah,
There's a whole other section of education.
we need to talk about after the colon.
Right.
After the semicolon. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Richard.
After the semicolon, and looking at this and thinking about this since last week, my feeling is that we should end that sentence with a period and eliminate any equivalent combination of education and so forth. My feeling is, and particularly in light of what the chief provided us in Milford, and I would assume that with the way people are today, and with particularly in Massachusetts with the Quinn bill, and I'm not sure what other states are doing, that people today are seeking more, and where we have over 50% of our own police force has a master's degree or more, that I think that we get into being very subjective is to, and I was looking at this, is combination of education, training, experience. You know, who's determining what the right combination is? And I think we could end up getting, you know, caught into a web, so to speak, with that. And that if we have it, that your master's degree with what we have here, that's what our education requirement is. And so, for the sake of discussion, I would like to amend the education experience, that it be what we had amended to, and changing it to where we have, after supervisory capacity, there would be a period, and that we eliminate or any equivalent combination of education, training, and experience which provides the required knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform the essential functions of the job. And just to speak on that, I involved, you know, in my own field and with that, and was at teaching university many years ago, and there were certain requirements that you had to have minimum. I served on the board of trustees of the library in Milford along with Ed Bertarelli years ago. And with hiring a director, we always had that the requirement was a master's in library science. There was not an and/or something else. You have to have that level of training to understand. Yes, you could have, and there were people in the library that said, oh, I could become the director because I've done all this work. Well, yeah, yes, they could and they couldn't, because they don't have that training that you get by putting in the time. And I think it's the same with being a police chief, fire chief, or whatever, that having a master's degree takes you to that next level and makes you a much better situation. And it will then eliminate a lot of these other people that are kind of on the fringe.
Okay, a motion by Richard, is there a second on that? Second.
Yeah,
Discussion.
I'd just like to discuss just a little bit more, and just throw out there for consideration that what if some other state that doesn't have an education requirement at a master's level has someone in the chief of police roles in a large size community who's been doing the job and doing it well, and it could be a good candidate, would have to be excluded because that person would not have a master's degree. Just something to consider.
Could I ask?
Yeah.
Chief, if I could ask the chief, are we unique in the country as far as the equivalent of the Quinn bill, where communities help pay for the cost of it? Because obviously that's an impetus of someone's working as a police officer in every level, you know, then they go to school and pay for it themselves in other states. I'm just wondering how unique we are as far as that goes.
I don't think we are. I know police chiefs across the country, and you're not serving in that position.
No, I just meant as far as the tuition.
I don't know that they offer the same incentives that you see here in Massachusetts, but keep in mind, even here in Massachusetts, you know, the state eliminated their half of the Quinn bill. So Milford kept it because that's how you retain police officers that you want to retain. Yeah. So that was the incentive there. It costs you more to replace them if they go elsewhere for the incentive. So You know, there is a cost factor there, but the cost factor of turnover in many communities right around us, that's exactly what they experience. I received a call from a chief 3-4 towns away from here where we've brought back 3 police officers that we trained, went there. Because the cost factor for them to train those people, new people, and the turnover is greater than if they paid them the educational incentive.
We have a motion.
But in Massachusetts, these education levels, and Jim Harron, I think he'll attest to it, it's not uncommon. You know, I mean, you take a look at us with the 4 young officers that are now pursuing their master's degree. You're looking at 65% of the department that will have a master's or a JD. That's not uncommon. Chris, your experience, Wellesley, education levels is still up there?
Very high, yeah. Bachelor's mostly, but several masters, especially at the supervisory level.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have any shortage of very well qualified candidates from all over the country if we eliminate that wording.
Richie?
Just to say what Jim was saying, and kind of counted Jody a little bit, there might be somebody out there that doesn't have a master's degree that does, but unfortunately, this is what we want, and so that person will never apply, because if I was a chief and I was in Iowa and I'm saying, gee, this looks good, well, but I don't have a master's, I've got a bachelor's, well, therefore I can't apply. You know, there are lots of different jobs that I've looked at when I was younger in my chosen profession and said, gee, that'd be something I might be interested in, but I didn't meet the requirements, exactly what they wanted, so I didn't apply. So we can't worry about those that are out there that maybe fit the bill that we might miss. We don't know that. So my thing is that I think that for my own feeling, and I think for the town of Milford, that by having, that they have to have a master's degree, I don't think we're setting the bar too high, and that we should go with that.
Daniel has, Don, I'm sorry, Don.
If I recall from the last meeting, we had discussion about this, and in terms of other experience or equivalencies. And Chief, was it you who brought up about someone who may have military experience that we would, you know, essentially not be able to consider if we limit ourselves to having a master's degree and not stating anything about equivalency?
The difficulty there was, well, that is one part of it. The other is, you know, how do you take and evaluate that? I mean, who on this committee is going to sit down and extrapolate the responsibilities of a major in the Army Reserves and how that correlates over to managing a law enforcement agency in Massachusetts?
Well, what I'm speaking of is someone who may have transitioned over or had, you know, had military experience, not necessarily the education, but command experience in the military that could transfer over and not have a specific master's degree.
I think that, you know, that would be, with all due respect, that's saying that, well, if we find a fire chief out there that's a really good manager of a fire department. No, wait.
From military to
but he's transitioning, he would be transitioning from managing a municipal agency over to managing a municipal agency, but he doesn't have the knowledge of the law. He doesn't have knowledge of a number of things. In other words, the military experience, granted, it's valuable. You have someone coming in at the ground level, you know, and that's why they get points. They get incentive points. Even here in Milford, non-civil service, you have military of any kind, you get 2 points on your score.
What I'm saying, Chief, though, is not to interrupt, but to clarify, is that someone who previously had military experience and police experience, supervisory and command experience, and is now applying for chief. So there's both, but doesn't necessarily have the educational background.
With all due respect, in Massachusetts, if you haven't gone to college and you haven't gone for your master's degree and you want to be a police chief, then you slipped up, because if you look across this state, I mean, I think when I started as a police chief, I was either I was within the first half dozen police chiefs that had a law degree. Now, there has to be over 30 out there. And not just at that level. I know of captains, lieutenants, deputy chiefs, you know, well-educated, a lot of experience. I agree with some of what Dr. Heller said. I think we're spending a lot of time trying to pull people down here. Oh, we might find, you know, the gem in the rough, you know, the diamond in the rough. Look, you're going to have a lot of diamonds up here, as Mr. Nero said. You're going to have a lot of applicants with a lot of experience, capabilities, well-educated, and able to do this job. I think, with all due respect, I think we spend a lot of time trying to reach down and find whoever we're looking to find, because...
So far, we have Richard made the motion, seconded by Donato. Now we'll go to Ed and then Donato. Ed.
I guess what Dr. Heller said is key to me, is that the difficulty, and then use the word extrapolate, all these equivalents. Equivalent of is 10% education, is 30% training, is 70% experience. Then if you do that for another person with a different criteria, you're open to, well, what are you doing here? Well, their education was a little better than this guy's training, and then we're in a minefield of all possibilities. So I really think this is, I know you said it was very common once a couple of meetings ago in HR things, but I think this is a unique thing where we're looking for a specific person. So I think Dr. Heller's motion is appropriate. So I don't do.
I'd like to be responsive to Donna's question. The only person, the type of person that might transist is a military police officer. And that would be somebody at the command level. They would have all of these requirements. They have educational requirements also.
Including a master's degree?
They probably would. If you had reached the command level, to reach that command level, you would have to have these master's.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they pay them.
Chris.
I agree with Dr. Heller as well. I think the fact that, especially since we got rid of the senior in the previous portion, it widened the band enough that I don't think we need anything after the semicolon.
Okay, so we have once again, a motion by Richard, seconded by Donato. Mr. Secretary, can you read the motion again?
A motion by Dr. Heller to amend the educational description to put a period where the semicolon is and eliminate the rest of the text.
Yep. Any other discussion?
And can we just specify which semicolon, because there's more than one semicolon?
You said after capacity.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Okay, move the seconded of the motion. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, I think that's, David, you go for it? Okay, Donato.
I saw something in several of the advertisements that I thought was excellent, and towards moving to hiring a CEO, the language was graduation from a nationally recognized executive development / command training program. They used an example, FBI Academy. I'd like to put that on the table to discuss. We're looking for that type of person.
Donato, can you repeat that again,
Yes.
please?
Graduation, as under education, under what we just finished doing, graduation from a nationally recognized executive development / command training program. And they used the example of FBI Academy and they had another one in there, but it looked like some sort of a state academy, but it's nationally recognized. I want to put that on the table as adding that underneath the educational and discuss it.
Is that a motion, Donato?
No, it's for discussion right now.
Okay, Chief, how about
I think if the term is, you know, that's a preference, but to have it as a requirement, I think you are closing yourself back in. By way of example, the FBI Academy in Quantico, you get 2 applicants a year from New England. So, you know, unless you fall into a specialized grouping, so, you know, state troopers that are working anti-terrorism, et cetera. But other than that, generally, it's 2 applicants.
How big are the classes? How big are the classes usually? Small?
I want to say, because they bring people from, as Dan is probably familiar, they bring people from around the world. So there's law enforcement officials, literally, from around the world. Our department, you have, and by way of example, you have one person who has, they call it the NA, National Academy. There's one person in our academy presently that graduated from the NA. No, there's two. There's two. There are two on the list, and one of them has been on the list, just waiting to climb up, 6 years. So it's tough to get in, and I think, Chris, if you had any experience, I know a number of wealthy officers also went through.
And several supervisors. I think you need to be at least a lieutenant. They make special exceptions.
Right, if you can show that you're commanding, for instance, a sizable detective unit. You tend to see at the end where it's a preference, because you got SMIP out there, there's a bunch of different, advanced trainings that are available.
Okay, using that, are there other things equivalent to the FBI Academy to go for law enforcement officers?
Yeah, you find there are. I mean, there's, I'm trying to, the acronym is the SMIP. There's a bunch of different institutes that do advanced training. And again, it's competitive. It's difficult to get into.
The purpose was reduced 100 down to a select 25 or 30, because we're going to pick 3 to 5, something like that.
A lot of these people selected, doesn't mean that they're most qualified, they're just in the right place at the right time.
No, I understand.
They won the lottery.
You mean at the school? Yeah.
I won that lottery, but then I got accepted to law school, so I lost that lottery. And that's the way it goes.
Scott?
Yeah, I agree with the chief, that I think that looking at some sort of, specialized training, giving it as a preference versus a requirement. I think the requirements are, I'm very comfortable with what we talked about, where we went from an education experience requirement. I think having that specialized training, I agree with the chief. I think having that,
very limited.
I think having that as a preferred, I think that'd be great, or, certainly,
That could prove to be the edge, is my point.
Yeah.
For that person, because
Let me make the motion.
it is a big feather in the cap.
Yeah.
Graduation from a nationally recognized executive development / command training program. Preferred, simply?
Yep.
Okay, that's the motion on the table.
Second.
Second, any discussion on that? Richard?
No, just move the question.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Opposed?
No.
Donna opposed?
No, I'm not opposed.
Oh,
I'm not opposed. I've
Okay.
spent too much time thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Put them down as half and half, okay?
Yes. Still trying to figure out what.
Jack, you like that? Yeah, all right. So how many in favor?
It's late.
Unanimous?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And that, that would go in place after supervisory capacity?
Yes.
No, it's going to go in as a separate category as preferred qualifications.
Under education.
Inexperience.
Under-
Simply do a sentence that,
Right.
Because there's a topic right here that says recommended minimum qualifications, and then this one would be a preferred.
Right, it's different.
Yeah, so we have to put it,
A minimum qualification is a requirement,
Yeah.
not a preferred.
So where we put that then, in the middle?
We have to create a separate section in the job description to be preferred.
What if that was something we just put,
In the job posting,
like, just keep it out of the job description and we add that extra verbiage into the job description? Anybody else, to give us,
good point.
and just keep it out of the job description?
Unanimously approved to it.
Uh-oh.
We're gonna change that now?
just put it in the job posting rather than in the job description, because usually a job description talks about the minimum qualifications required.
Right.
And that's not a...
Yes, no, you're right, that's good.
Preference will be given to candidates.
So we undo this?
Yeah. So motion to strike the previous vote.
Okay. How about just motion to include it in the...
It has to be the people who made the motion and seconded it.
You gotta do it officially.
Yeah, let's do it. So motion to strike the previous...
Okay.
Seconded by David. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay. And now, we're going to put that in where, again?
Job posting.
Who's making that motion?
Motion by David, seconded by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Oh, you okay, Donna?
Yes.
Okay, Jody,
We're getting giddy here.
where are we now, Jody, as far as what we've done?
Is there anything else in the job description that anyone would like to discuss?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, I brought this up last time, and I know it's very, very silly, but I have to bring it up again, because the valid Massachusetts motor vehicle license being required, I don't understand, like, if someone lived in North Smithfield or Woonsocket, why they couldn't be our chief. And I'm glad, Chief, you let me know it's 15-mile radius of door-to-door.
There's a couple different issues. I gave Dino a
Yeah.
handout. I hope you saw it.
Oh, I'm...
Yeah, it
So-
says Massachusetts driver's
The
license.
Massachusetts driver's license, our rules and regulations state that an officer, and that includes me, must have and maintain a current and valid Massachusetts motor vehicle operator's license. The policy, when we hire at ground level, so police officers, and these were promulgated by the Board of Selectmen, the policy, and myself, candidates must meet the following minimum criteria: have a valid Massachusetts driver's license.
You have that, Chief.
And you find it in job descriptions in the police department. And then lastly, I went out and looked, and when you take a look at, over at civil service, and you look at police departments across the state, valid Massachusetts driver's license.
I didn't see that, Chief, and I apologize. I didn't review that ahead of time.
That's why I went in and looked through these things. The other thing I took a look at, you have the information, if I could touch on them real quick.
Sure, no,
That
go
way
ahead,
folks
Chief.
are on board. So in Massachusetts, a police officer is not required to have a license to carry firearms for the firearm that's issued to them by the police chief. Okay? They carry it, they say they carry it on their badge. They actually carry it pursuant to Chapter 41, Section 98, which says that they can carry within the Commonwealth any weapons that the police chief deems necessary for them. And then you move into our rules and regulations. Rules and regulations, officers may, at the discretion of the chief, be required to have a current valid license to carry. And then you move from there, as we, again, our new hiring policy, non-civil service, it says the candidates must have a license to carry firearms. More
Excuse me,
common than
Chief,
not.
we're passing it out now. We
Yeah,
forgot to
sorry.
pass it.
I forgot to pass it.
Oh, because I didn't have it, that's why I didn't read it.
Yeah, we didn't get it.
So more common than not, that police departments require the police officers to have a valid license to carry. And there's a number of reasons. One is that system has a flagging capability. So if something comes up in that person's private life that comes to the attention of law enforcement, there's the flag. And that's what happens with anyone that has that license to carry. And I'll come back real quick, and you folks can, if you have any questions. As far as residency requirements, the state law says that if you're a civil service officer, and keep in mind that although we went out of civil service, all of those officers that had that status still have that status. So they're required within 9 months of their appointment to move within 10 miles of the community, border to border as the crow flies. Okay, so it's not their house to the station door or anything like that. Furthest border to the closest border.
And Chief, you enforce that, right?
Yes, because they bring in maps, believe me. So the legislature amended that because non-civil service officers could live 15 miles. So the way the legislature did it is they said, okay, all of you civil service officers are represented by unions as well. If you negotiate the 15 miles, we'll give it to you. We did that. So here in Milford, back in 2015, the Board of Selectmen bargained with the association and increased it, so it's 15 miles border to border as the crow flies, as residency. I did look at some materials, and I just wanted to bring up that Mr. De Niro provided to the chairman, and they were sent out. And one of the things that jumped out at me was the use of polygraphs or lie detectors. In Massachusetts, there's a specific statute, Chapter 149, Section 19B. It prohibits use of any type of lie detector, polygraph, in any kind of employment practices. So promotion, hiring, regardless, and it specifically says to include police officers. So the only exception in that particular section is if we're conducting an investigation, you can utilize the polygraph. So, and the polygraph, just one other side, they're not admissible in the courts in Massachusetts. So even if you utilize them, you're never going to get them before a judge. If you even had a disciplinary process and you relied on that, eventually you end up in Superior Court and the judge has to disregard that. So your case is in trouble. That's mass driver's licenses, license to carry, firearms, residency requirements, and polygraph. I try to put it into a capsule here. If there's any questions at any time,
This is perfect, Chief. Thank you very much.
shoot me a note. It's over there.
So we can make these final updates to the
I've got a
description.
couple that I want to offer. Go ahead. And that is the physical demands, Chief. There's nothing in here that talks about a field environment. It talks about a number of things, but it sounds like you're an office worker. And I thought something should be added in a field environment.
So now which page?
Physical demands, it's about the third
Page 5.
from the end.
Page 5.
Chief's got to be able to go out in the field. Talks about a number of things. but-
Yeah, it does. We had talked about that the last time.
It's under work
We talked about
environment?
it. Yeah.
One at a time, okay? Chief, can you clarify that for us?
It's in another section.
Maureen had it.
It's under work environment, those kinds of things. The chief and I actually talked about that.
I'm sorry, is it in someplace
Yeah,
else?
it's in another
And
section.
it talks about
Okay. The last one was visual demands. And about the third line down, it says materials such as instrumentation. I don't understand what that sentence means. I looked up instrumentation. It means a band, a summary, a group of instruments. So it's just a word that I'm not sure if it was misused or they mean something
Instruments?
in imagery.
No, instruments.
He's got to work in a crime lab. A lot of instruments in the crime lab.
Instrumentation in the dictionary means a band or group of instruments.
I missed that one.
Yeah, I don't know, it was in the original job
Yeah.
description. I wasn't clear what that was, chief, and...
Okay, can we find a substitute for the word or decide we're going to accept it? Such as,
Are they referring to just if there's, you know, if they had different instruments such as maybe, you know, the fingerprint machine or something of that nature?
the word defined in the dictionary means band.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but I'm
instrument.
trying to figure out what it is that they're trying to want it to have.
Okay, improper use of the word, but I missed that totally in the whole thing.
But they say it's non-written materials. So what do they, that's,
Is there a similar word that means something
just
different?
before it, it says non-written materials for instrument.
Well, the word instruments, or instrument,
Yeah,
is a device.
Right. Instrument materials
just make it
such
for
as
instruments
instrument.
for analytical purposes.
That makes sense, instrument? Or
It would if they, to me, with the analytical there,
Right.
would be that it's an instrument of something, You know, I mean, in the medical field, we have a lot of instruments that are analytical devices.
Stethoscope.
And, yeah, yes, and that, so that, I mean, but I don't know, I mean, again, it's,
How about we remove the such materials as an instrument for analytical purposes? Does that make sense?
I think instruments makes the best
Non-written
sense.
materials as an instrument.
One at a time, okay? One at a time.
For analytical purposes. I don't know.
I think what they're probably trying to say is, you know, all the instruments we do use, you know, you're
No,
talking...
it doesn't mean
Well, I
that in
think
a
maybe
dictionary.
somebody at some point in time just
Right.
added that for field breath testing and breath testing inside and fingerprint machines with a lot of the equipment that we use.
Right on
that we
that.
use.
Black
We got
boxes.
Scott, then the chief. Scott?
I mean, I think if we just change...
I don't know if it's necessary
I
to
think
have it.
viewing non-written materials such as instrument or instruments for analytical purposes, I think it accomplishes the same thing. It changes it from instrumentation to instruments.
Yeah.
Instruments can be determined as a speedometer is an instrument.
Okay.
I think that's what they probably meant.
Yeah.
So, right, exactly.
Never got that
So
way.
I think if we change it to, so I make a motion, we change that to instruments.
I'll second it.
Motion by Scotty, second by Donato, that we change instrumentation to instruments. Any discussion? Bob, all in favor?
Right,
Unanimous.
good catch, Dan.
Can we move on to another,
Typo.
to the end of that sentence, please? And with the need for color vision? It just sounds- it-
Where, Donna? I'm sorry.
That's us.
Right. We're changing it in such as in change of
Donna, I'm
They
sorry.
need
Yeah, you
color vision. But it doesn't seem like it's grammatically correct. Visual demands include constantly reading documents for general understanding and analytical purposes, retraining, reviewing.
Is this excluding people who are
It's
on?
just a yes. you
One at a
gotta
time,
have
please.
vision to be a law enforcement officer. You got to be able to distinguish colors.
Okay, so if you're color,
Maybe
If you're
that,
bo-
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
If you're colorblind, you can't be a law enforcement officer. You can't be a federal one, I don't know if you can be a...
Right, but perhaps that needs to be a separate sentence because it doesn't flow with the,
It says close, distance, color vision. It does.
no, it says and with a need, it says visual demands include, and if you continue that on, and with a need for color vision,
It's redundant. It's
it's
in the
not
next sentence.
grammatically correct.
Right,
There's
mine
no
reads differently.
verb.
Right.
Distance,
No, no,
close.
I'm talking about this,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Right above it, huh?
right above it. So it's after routinely reviewing non-written materials such as instruments for analytical purposes.
Period.
Period.
Yep.
Yeah, it's redundant.
It's redundant. And then just take
I don't
out
know what it means.
and to vision. And the next sentence basically says, includes it.
Same thing.
So I'd like to make a motion to exclude from the first sentence the end part, starting with and. So and with a need for color vision.
Get rid of that.
Second.
Thank you.
Second? Second by Jody. All in favor? All unanimous. So that's out, Chris. So,
Good job.
Outstanding.
we have a motion to adopt what we've done tonight.
Second.
Motion by Edward, seconded by Donna. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? And that includes the educational requirement that you put in as well. Okay. Just a couple of more things if I can. We've talked about some of the places, I think we have the information. There's some of the places where we should and are ready to post, such as, the Beacon, Indeed. I want you guys to talk about this, okay?
So there are a number of places that definitely we want to post. All I did was, Chief, I think you had identified some places too that were specific to where police chiefs might look
Yes.
for positions. And so I did some research this weekend, and all this is some of the costing. So one of the places that had been proposed by, I think this committee, was perhaps in the Boston Globe. I'm not sure the cost is worth the posting on the Globe. It does also give you some postings on Monster.com. However, Indeed.com does the same thing for free. And so there's no cost at all to post on Indeed unless you want to make it a sponsored job, in which case there's an extra fee. I've offered all of that to them. One of the other recommendations certainly was going to be through the MMA and the Beacon, so I put the pricing in there. That's definitely a place we would want to target. Chief, one of the places that you had mentioned was the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So I went onto their website and I found their cost model on there. And then I checked two other places you had mentioned, which were the Mass Chiefs of Police and the New England. And I didn't see anything on there, but what it seems to be is if you post on the international and you pay the extra upgrade, it goes to all of these other places. I'm not sure that's true, and I'd look for your advice. Okay.
The difference between IACP, they're going to get their membership, and granted, they're most of the police chiefs, if not all of them, belong. You don't get necessarily the people that are at the level community level. You could have lieutenants, captains, deputy chiefs that are associate members of either that organization or the mass chiefs, so they don't spend money over the international because they're never going to the So they will join the mass chiefs because their goal, their future, goal is to be a police chief. So they're trying to get in that work at this stage. So
Where you get the advertisement from the mass chiefs is they blast it out on email to everyone that's associate member or general member. And then
everybody looks at that, right?
Oh, yeah.
But is there a cost to it?
And then you'd have to talk to them. I believe there is, because then they have a monthly newsletter which goes out to everyone, and that they list in there job opportunities, and you can, as you said, electronically link. So they will link so that people can just tap in. So I mean, New England, you might want to save some money because it's just, you're going to be tapping the same people that, but I believe the the bylaw requires that we advertise not only nationally, but in a local newspaper. So I think we're going to have to advertise at least in the Milford Daily News to meet the bylaw. I'd have to go back and read it again. But off the top of my head, I believe that's the case.
Yeah, Milford Daily News or Town Crier.
I came across a couple others, and I just don't know if they're still active. LEAP's job file.
I'm not sure, Dan. I don't think so. I think...
Is LEAP still used? Is it still, used to go to all police departments?
Police Executive Research Forum, so PERF, centered in Washington, very large command personnel membership across the country.
Do they accept these types of ads?
Yeah.
Okay, can you capture that? That one's Mass Criminal History Systems Board, Network, Alert File Sector.
That's, so we can go on to criminal, it's CGIS, and CGIS, connects to the federal side of things. So that's how we communicate the computers at the police department. There are files that you can drop, so we can pull down one of those ads and just drop it in there. That, we post dispatches when we're looking at dispatches, police officer positions. Primarily for us, it's
just capture it. And the bylaw says nationally and locally. Now, are we covered with the national one?
Yes.
I think with the international chiefs of police.
The word is international, I understand that. But does that cover all, this country?
Yes.
And the world?
IACP does, but IACP, the primary membership's here in the United States.
Okay, so we got it covered. Oh, excuse me, there were two others.
Go ahead, Dan.
Crime Control Digest, Virginia.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Law Enforcement News in New York.
Yeah, very strong. It's very strong. Law Enforcement News.
Okay, just capture that.
You'll get where people do advertise they did.
Scott?
My question would be, is actually when we think about from a national perspective,
I think Indeed might, if we posted with Indeed actually would cover us both nationally as well as internationally. It's a website that's available. It's very commonly used. It's very similar to Monster.com. In fact, it's actually much more widely used. Indeed is something that's pretty inexpensive. It's actually on the last page. But it's...
What is that, Scott?
Indeed is an online job posting. There's actually a fair amount of advertising out there for them, for the app specifically. But it's a very, very widely used recruiting tool for all industries, law enforcement, certainly being one of them, but it's across. I mean, I have the app on my phone. You'll see everything from, you know, a bank teller in Bangladesh to a police chief in, you know, New York City, and everything else in between will be in there.
And Jody and I, when we were doing some of our early research on job descriptions, we went to Indeed and put in police chief in the United States, and we got them from all different states. So it is a place where a lot of municipalities will post as well.
So it should cover us from a national perspective because it is available nationally.
Could we put something together for our next meeting that outlines these 10 places, maybe a brief description of what they are and what rates? Some of them might be free, for instance, we do them, and but we pick up a couple extras, and then we can vote on where we're going to, what we're going to spend and what we're going to advertise.
And Chief,
Yes.
Tom, you mentioned the, you know, the Chiefs Association. There may be 10 of them, but if you could give some recommendations, you know, whether it be 2 or 3, whatever.
Right, so I've been communicating with Maureen, so, and Dan Nero did come up with a few that I didn't have on my list, but...
Hey, we've done so much today, this is great, and hopefully, if we could have a meeting Tuesday, because there's a couple other things. The town administrator, in the selectmen's budget, there's some monies that he can use, like for the beacon, some of the other things, not a lot of money, but we do have some money, so we can, you know, move forward on that. And if you could just, Maureen, Jody, touch bases on the last one, this page. Yeah. Please. This is the town of Milford seeking qualified applications for the position of police chief.
This was just a job posting that Jody and I put together early on when we were writing the job description, just to give an idea. Originally, it was intended to show the difference between the job description and the posting. One of the places is go factor, it's an mentioned. Some of the places where you advertise, you pay by the line or by the word or by the paragraph, and so how much we include in that will definitely make a drastic impact on our budget. What we can do for those where there's a bigger cost, perhaps, is post a smaller thing, again, taking us back to a link with all the materials we discussed before.
Smart.
Yeah, I checked on the population. Actually, it's 27,999, but this says 28,000, so we'll stick with that. The selectmen have 5 positions, contracted positions. The police chief, fire chief, administrator, town council, and the finance director. So, you see where it says salary range? So this is something that we could probably put in. A contracted position by the Board of Selectmen. Salary would be based on education, years of supervisory experience, etc.
You gotta have a figure. You're trying to attract people, they've got to know what that figure is, so even if you give it a broad range,
Chief,
they gotta know.
what do you think the range should be?
There's the range in Article 2. You can just pull it from Article 2. You know, but you do want to put in there the fact that you have the educational incentive, you know, paid holidays. That's
So you
where
make 300, so should we put that in there?
I wish I made
99,000 to 300
All right, Maureen, Jody, we can check with the, okay?
after 18 years, maybe.
Okay, is it all right if we meet next Tuesday and just wrap some of this stuff up?
Yeah.
And then Maureen and Jody also have some information on what we're talking about on firms that we can talk to that would provide a tremendous service to us, right?
We have to determine what we want a firm to do, and what either the committee or Maureen as the director of HR should do.
Do we have figures that go along with that? You know, we'll do this for 5 to 10,000 bucks, depending on what you want.
Dan, I don't think we have
that part yet. What I did,
Yeah.
I researched the different companies and have all the information from their website. The next step would be to call to find out what are their services. There's some a la carte, so you could say, we want you to help here, but not here.
Yeah.
The committee would have to determine how much it was. So I didn't get into any kind of pricing yet.
Could I, on some firms, do you have a list there of who you're,
I have-
just at this point, not to get in, but who do you?
Sure, there were 3, and just so you know, I didn't just randomly
Right.
pick them. What I did was find, in my original reach out to people in Massachusetts on their job descriptions, several towns have used a company called Badge Quest.
Yep.
That was definitely from local.
Right.
And then I found 2 other jobs, so I think it was somewhere down on the Cape, I believe. Oh, actually, no, but
Badge Quest is out of Plymouth.
well, so Gloucester used a company called Municipal Resources Incorporated, and then there's another group of towns from Massachusetts that used a company called Resource Management Associates Incorporated. So those were the 3 that I found. In particular, the reason I focused on those was because other towns and municipalities in Massachusetts have used those companies. I don't know to what level of success.
Okay, I've got one of the names that I've got, I had Badge Quest, which was used a couple of years ago, last time. It was also, and there's another company, but they're no longer, but it's called Nera and Associates. I'll give you the name for, and right now they're out of San Francisco, but they're nationwide, and they were actually hired by the committee that hired the chief.
No, Badge Quest.
Well, they also used, they did.
Okay.
Yep, they had used Snare also. So, and I just, because I was looking for them and I wanted to know, and I spoke actually with Robert Nera, and he gave me his number and said they're in Sacramento, Florida, and Chicago. And, but they, he said if we needed anything from them, they'd be happy. So I'll give you that information.
And Chief, if you have any suggestions.
I'll take a look. I've been communicating with Maureen.
Yeah, I just want to thank Maureen and Jody again for a great job. Working very closely with the chief, and also the committee tonight has really done a tremendous job. It's made tremendous movement, and I think we're serving the people of Milford well. And I think after next week, we'll be well on our way. Motion to adjourn? Yes. Motion by Ed, second by Donna. Thank you.